practically every European country became a democracy, where the governments, the traditional restored kingdoms were overthrown and replaced by some form of democracy, where democracy has, well, you could say democracy light, yeah, where sometimes it was just an oligarchy, but it was at least an overthrowing of the existing class structure. And 1897 is not as much a political feat as a mathematical one. 1897 is arguably the first international conference of mathematicians. So for the first, an international gathering, no longer a national gathering, but an international gathering of mathematicians, where, yeah, so a new concept arises. That's at least the claim that I make. Must you agree? No, but do have good reasons not to agree. What was mathematics in the second half of the 19th century? Well, first of all, it was, and it really was pure mathematics. In universities, that was the key concept, and it had far-reaching consequences also beyond university limits, also within technical, within technical education, as you will see and as you have seen had if you read the syllabus. But pure mathematics is increasingly becoming more abstracted from reality. So the abstractions that have been used to abstract from reality in the early 19th century are becoming realities themselves, and you can abstract from those, which is, you can imagine this is becoming increasingly abstract. Yeah. People start thinking about, proof theory. But, and this is, I think, really important to realize, there are many other mathematical practices that emerge in the second half of the 19th century, or that continue in the second half of the 19th century, and that play a, well, notably, last one, education. For most people, beyond elementary or secondary education, there's no idea of mathematics anymore. So this is an important feat indeed. Yeah, mathematics education is becoming, and increasingly becomes, a key issue in what people perceive that mathematics is about. Movies as well, by the way, but yeah, this is an important one. But in physics, in engineering, and in probability calculus and statistics, there are mathematical practices that become relevant to society. Okay, let's see what mathematics looks like. You've just seen the analysis by Schlögl, and I want you to be aware of the key figure of Riemann in this matter. I used him in the last pages of, or the last sections of chapter 6 on the nation state, the right of the nation state, and there he is the man who, kind of puts an end to discussions on how to use the limit concept within calculus, or within analysis, if you prefer. Well, if you like, you could say Weierstrass really did, but which is, you would have good reasons to say so. But Riemann here is slightly earlier, and he's the key figure, both showing that, you can define the integral without reference to the area. You can define it with reference to the function, and you can call a function integrable, which is different than the conception used by anyone before him. There is always reference to an area, so he just says, well, it's an area if the function is integrable to him. No longer I will go and calculate this area, which is a different point of view. So he epitomizes the developments of the early 19th century, and with his non-Euclidean geometry, he sets the scene for the second half of the 19th century. That's what makes him important. That is what makes him in my view, a key figure. So he, with the introduction of non-Euclidean geometry, he shows the way that mathematicians are heading, the road that they are going to take. Why non-Euclidean geometry, you might wonder, and why wasn't it there before? Yeah. Oh, I should start shortly by saying what professionalization actually entails here. Professionalization is a sociological concept which denotes the rise of a profession, and a profession meaning here a group of people being paid to do a certain job. So being paid to do mathematics. Were there no people being paid to do mathematics before 1848? Oh yes, there were. I won't bullshit you there, but yeah. But then you're talking surveyors, you're talking map makers, you're talking cannoneers, you're talking, the practical mathematicians, the teachers, definitely the teachers. But being paid to do mathematical research, who did mathematical research before 1848? Well, Newton did. He published. Leibniz did. He published. Euler did. He published. All of these people were exceedingly wealthy men who, by showing off that they could also spend time on looking into the reasons for creation, the reasons why creation worked, well, bought their place or earned their place within a royal society or within a court or within whatever place they wanted to be in. They didn't need to work. Their work was not in these publications. They were not paid for these publications. By these publications and by dedicating these publications to even more important people, they could show that they had time. That they were of independent means and that they could do bloody well whatever they wanted. That was. And here with Riemann, we have someone who's actually paid to do mathematics, to publish on mathematics. A new theorem, and that's different. That's different. Yeah?
So the main difference is that they got paid by now? Because in the book said that there was now a distinction between being amateur and professional. But like at first there were also, at the time they noticed the difference between pure and applied mathematicians. So now is the difference that professionals get paid, or?
Yeah, the professional gets paid for publishing mathematical research. New mathematical research. That's something you can get paid for. Where that was leisure work before. And amateur work. So you could say, in a sense, Newton was an amateur. Please. Yeah? An amateur in the sense that he did not get paid for the job. The distinction between amateur and professional only rises at the moment that the professional himself rises. At the moment that you are being paid for your job. Now, so with this sociological meaning of the word professionalizing comes the an educational system that upholds these professional needs. That tells you how to behave as a mathematician, what a good proof is, when a proof is beautiful or not. That's a journal, or professional journals. Were there no journals where mathematicians could publish? Of course there were journals where you could publish. But specific mathematical journals where other mathematicians would be deciding upon whether your paper was any good or not. So that these norms that we want to uphold were actually upheld within the choirs of these journals. The professional societies are another way of showing that. Do you actually need professional society to become professional? No, not necessarily, but it is one way of going about. Norms have to be upheld in some way, and you do that through meetings with fellow, with professional colleagues, through writing about the same subject and actually reading the stuff that your colleagues produce. And by having been taught in the same system. By a graduation that's clear cut, yeah, you graduate, that means that you've actually done these and these and these courses, minimal, and perhaps some more, but that's the bare minimum. We call you a professional mathematician now. And non-Euclidean geometry is part of that. Non-Euclidean geometry is part of that new professionalized mathematics, very much so. Was there no non-Euclidean mathematics, non-Euclidean geometry before 1848? Well, strangely enough, there was. And there was even out in the open, there was the idea of spherical geometry. Every surveyor knew very well that if he was surveying, mapping a larger area, that the sum of the angles of the triangle was larger than 180 degrees. And you can take the very simple example of a triangle that has A and B on the equator and C on one of the poles. Then you have three angles of 90 degrees, which is very much larger than 180. So every surveyor knew this, and they called it the spherical excess of the triangle. And they could calculate it. You could calculate that by means of your position. That's why astronomy and surveying goes hand in hand. You want to know your position on the globe so that you can calculate your spherical excess. And that was used to actually map the world, map the globe. Now, within non-Euclidean geometry, you do it slightly different. You take this example and you take it as a geometry on its own, at face value. This is a geometry. If you simply negate or take one of the negations of the parallel postulate and go on reasoning. But then you have to to accept that this parallel postulate, which does seem kind of obvious if you think about it, can also be negated and yields something that you are also accepting to call geometry. That's a step, as you may feel, yeah? You have to take that, you have to dare to take that step before entering the field of non-Euclidean geometry. And that's the step that Riemann was willing to take, and more than that, not only did he take that step, he even went a step further and said, well, the distance function that we use doesn't necessarily have to be that distance function. We can use another distance function, not based on the Pythagorean theorem, but taking, for example, 4 powers instead of second powers, yeah, instead of squares. It works. Was that the abstract way of matrix that we think about? No, not yet, but it is going in that direction. He's making a geometry that's simply more open to other axioms, completely irrelevant axioms. Completely irrelevant? Well, the globe is still part of creation. But yeah, you can take the negation of the parallel axiom in 2 directions. You can produce spherical or elliptical geometry, but you can also produce hyperbolic geometry, which is completely ludicrous and yeah, and still is a valid geometry in that abstract sense of the word, to Riemann, which is the step that he dared to take, and that set the scene for the late 19th century. Mathematicians went along. Yes, this abstract way of thinking, that we like that, we enjoy that, we love it. That's the way what we are going to do. That's what we are going to do because we'll make things more exact that way. I think I have a beautiful quote, yes, a beautiful quote here from Charles Godson, Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. It may well be doubted whether, in all ranges of science, there is any field so fascinating to the explorer, so rich in hidden treasures, so fruitful in delightful surprises as that of pure mathematics. And he means pure mathematics in practically our sense of the word. I'll have 2 books by Dodson handed around and you can see what he means with pure mathematics. The charm lies chiefly, I think, in the absolute certainty of its results, for that is what, beyond all mental treasures, the human intellect craves for. Let us only be sure of something. More light, more light. And if our faith be deaf, give light and let us die. Yeah, he's really passionate about pure mathematics, as you can see. Yeah, this is the cry that through all the ages is going up from perplexed humanity, and science has little else to offer that will really meet the demands of its votaries than the conclusions of pure mathematics. You really have to be devoted to pure mathematics if you write something like this, right? He writes it in the preface, and within that same preface he says, well, nobody ever reads a preface, so it doesn't really matter what I write. But let me continue. Yeah, he frantically believes in pure mathematics. At the same time, he is one of the people who is not very keen on the very, very, very abstracted ideas that do go round in mathematics. So he has his limits. He loves to deal with circle squarers, and he does continue dealings with them. He loves to teach logic and Euclidean geometry. He does teach linear algebra as one of the concepts that he does embrace, but he does not necessarily adhere to non-Euclidean geometry. Neither does he teach statistics, for example, which is too new and too susceptible of suggestions, according to him. I give an example in the syllabus which you may read and see why he believes that you should be shunning away from statistics and calculations of probability. So professionalization goes not in a uniform direction, but Riemann sets a scene, and in the second half of the 19th century we see more and more pure mathematics, more and more mathematics that we recognize. Although if you turn the pages of Dodgen's books, you will notice that there is a lot of text which is not recognizable in our mathematics textbooks. It has different pages. I have here an example from Richard Dedekind, Stetigkeit und Irrationale Zahlen. I'll hand out books around as well, so you may have a look. The original is from 1872. This is a early 20th century edition, but he tries to be precise about what real numbers are. He tries to give a precise definition, a precise relation between the number line and the geometrical line, trying to come to grips with continuity. I'm not going into details about how he does that. You can read that for yourself, and you know your delicate cuts, and if you don't, never mind. Yeah. But what's important here is that he does this to the students of the Technical Hochschule in Braunschweig. So a technical education facility. He wants his future engineers to be aware of the intricacies that are held within the real numbers. And that's really far-reaching. You can imagine that by the early 20th century, some of these engineers were rebelling against their mathematics teachers who wanted to teach them far too much.